Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Reves Center. I'm Elizabeth Harbin. I'm the director of the Charles Center, and we are sponsoring today's talk in collaboration with the Reves Center. We're delighted to have you all here to welcome James Whitlow Delano, who is a photojournalist who's been based in Japan for, I think, 29 years now, which has given him a platform for covering issues of environmental and societal concern all over Asia, but really all over the world. I think we'll be fortunate to see some of those today. The reason why he's here is because the Charles Center has a collaboration with the Pulitzer Center for Crisis Reporting. And James is a grantee of the Pulitzer Center and works with them, and then also works with our SHARP seminar in journalism, which is an experience we offer to students who apply in the spring, and then throughout the following academic year work with experienced journalists to produce their own journalistic piece, which then gets published on the Pulitzer Center. So if you're a student and that sounds really exciting to you, look for applications to come out for that in the spring. For next year, we'll be looking for our next cohort. Back to James, his work has been published all over the place, from the New York Times to National Geographic, to Time, The Guardian, and others. He's also the founder of the Everyday Climate Change Instagram account, which features not only his own work, but those of other photographers looking at climate change on all of the continents. Really grateful to Reves, and especially Kate Hoving, who organized today's talk and is hosting us here today. And I'd like to welcome James to William & Mary.
So thank all of you for coming. Just a little background. I've done a lot of work at Pulitzer Center. As you mentioned, I'm based in Tokyo, Japan, freelance photographer. Pulitzer Center has really, no exaggeration at all, to say that they've supported many of my most important projects over the last decade and a half. They make it possible to logistically do things that are not always easy to do, locations and so on. I'm deeply interested in postmodern society, working in Asia. And the way this particular body of work started, that I'll share with you today, it's on plastic. I was just in the Philippines. I'll share a little bit of the results of this story called Happy Land, plastic recycling. It was made in a slum called Happy Land in Manila. Filipinos are eminently optimistic, and this entire slum has been converted over to plastic recycling, and they call it Happy Land. And it's not always a happy place to live, as you will see. But going back even further, I kind of came to this kind of work because when I first traveled in Asia, I would find myself wanting to go someplace beautiful, because there are many beautiful places, but you'd have to go through an hour and a half or more of very rough environmental destruction. East Asia, in particular, there'll be work from other places as well, has seen more testing of the environment's ability to heal than we've ever seen in human history. It's hard to overstate that. So this is part of that, and I'll describe to you what you're seeing and why I chose it. This first image is in Chennai, India, and when I'm traveling on another assignment, I was actually here to teach a workshop in a place called Pondicherry, and I'll spend a couple of days out with my camera. A lot of these are plastic bags or plastic tarpaulin, but also synthetic fabrics. So 60% of India's fabrics are synthetic. That equals plastic. And all of this is getting ready to wash into the Bay of Bengal. So it's quite, the volume is actually quite staggering. Okay. I went to... So this is in Happy Land. This is actually pre-reporting. When I pitched this to the Pulitzer Center, I had been working on Duterte's drug war, and I'll share a little bit of that with you to set the context. So this is in the midst of a drug war, and this is the way young men can earn a living as opposed to getting into things like dealing drugs. And what's interesting is every time I go back to the Philippines, I learn something new. So this is Happy Land. They're sorting out PET bottles, different kinds of plastic. Plastic is not plastic. PET bottles can be recycled over and over again, and the purity of the PET is important because the finest can be used for fabrics, and the final recycler wants the highest quality so they can get the most money for it. Other plastics you can only recycle once, or maybe sometimes not at all. So I was reporting on the drug war. I knew about Happy Land, and I thought I would pay a visit, and I thought that this could be a really important story. This is Manila. So the Philippines is #1 in the world for contribution to ocean plastics, and 7 of the 10 highest contributors to ocean plastics are in Asia, including South Asia. Philippines borders Southeast Asia with China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, a little bit of Indonesia. And that is where most of our ocean plastics come into the ocean, is in the South China Sea. If I were to give a hypothesis why this is so, it's just that recently this might have been a banana leaf or something organic to wrap. Filipinos and Southeast Asians use that as packaging up until very recently. So, and the grinding poverty, a lot of Southeast Asian countries, the income inequity over the last 20 years has shrunk significantly, but not in the Philippines. The elite live as well as Williamsburg or better, behind walls topped with glass or gated communities, while people who are on the lower end of the scale are in multi-generational poverty. So these young men are in Tondo. Happy Land is in the top left corner. And I just walk around. During the day, it's okay. At night, it might even be okay as long as you're on a main road. This is the paradox of Filipino slums, is that it's relatively safe. It's families living there. So what's happening here, you can see the man on the far right has soap suds on him. He interrupted his shower because a garbage truck came by and they want to get the best, new, choicest recyclables to bring to the dealers to sell by the kilo. And this is in Happy Land. So once the plastics are sorted, they put them on trucks and then bring them to bigger dealers. This is an idea. So this is Happy Land. It's not a very happy place. Crime-wise, it's better than the next one, slum over called Aroma. All of these slums have names. You've got Happy Land, you have Aroma, you have Parolas, you have Baseco. I have to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure. Some maybe description, others maybe just place names for these places. Or it could be a name of a town where somebody came from the provinces, because a lot of these people who move here moved to Manila from outer islands. This is where the Pasig River empties into Manila Bay. So this is a few years ago. And they're undergoing a process they've got a plastic ban now. They're starting to build walls on the rivers and then fences on top of the walls so you can't throw plastics into the river. It's yet to be seen whether this is a hall of mirrors sort of thing or smoke and mirrors sort of thing, because is it simply that the plastic is washing out to sea more quickly and not getting hung up on the posts of structures, or is there actually less plastic? So that's something I have to research with experts. But I will say I returned to this place and there was plastic, but less of it. This is 2017. And this is a river, Estero something, I can't remember the exact name, but completely clogged with trash. And you'll notice on the bridge to the far right, people are living on and under the bridge. Just desperate poverty there. And this is Amador Ung's aunt. He was my kind of key person in this project, owns this particular small recycling plant. And he's one of the local guys who work there for an hourly wage. This is Happy Land on the other side. Very little plumbing. A lot of the garbage goes right into the bay. And by the way, those are quite wealthy, Manhattan level apartments. So it's hard to understate the inequity of income in Manila. This is what happens when all of the trash comes in these carts out from the barangay, which are neighborhoods. Barangay is a Filipino word that came from boats, and they call a neighborhood a barangay because it was like a community who came on a boat. and they clean out the plastics, and then they'll wheel them over to the dealer. It is dirty work, as you can imagine. But people are dressing well. I mean, people are proud there. Everybody has pride. Everybody wants a better life. And this is better than other kinds of work. So it's better than crime. It's better than being a victim of Duterte's drug war, which is a real possibility. This is in Baseco. Again, just giving you an idea of how labor intensive, and it's dirty, hard work. So once people have pulled the plastic from the trash in whatever way, form, then they'll transport it to the dealers who are lined up along here. She's collecting plastics and so on. See all the plastics, even styrofoam. And then the sorting starts in Happy Land. And this is Amador Ang. He's an interesting guy. He is ethnically Chinese. And you don't have to know much about China. He doesn't look Chinese. He has a Chinese grandmother. Knows no Chinese. He's completely Filipino in culture, but very proud of that heritage. He studied criminal law, but he admitted to me that he wasn't tall enough to become a police officer. So he works for his auntie, and his wife works in Hong Kong, one of the many of the Filipino diaspora working around the world. So they're separated, and his children live with grandparents. And that's not unusual in the Philippines. We've seen that already. Different kinds of plastic in big bins. And then loading it on the trucks. Tying it down. And you'll see this, and this is the company, the scrap dealer, G&B scrap dealer. So this is my first day, I just happened upon it. I wanted to see if I could find somebody who was willing to show me their work. And then he said, I'm going to the dealers in Plastic City. And it's across town, a place called Valenzuela. Sure. And I joined Amador workers. This is a separate truck, fully loaded. And you can see people are really friendly. It's just characteristic of the Philippines. It makes it easier for a photojournalist. It really does. Here's Amador and one of the workers on our way. And this is looking out over Manila, just typical. You have very, almost handmade structures, and then you have the high rises of the wealthy. And I did learn in the Philippines that the stratification of poverty. So these are cinder block slums. This would be the older, more established, and frankly, they have a little more income. Then you have plywood slums, usually built over rivers or watery areas. And then you have people living in tents. I met a woman during just one of the most bizarre things. During the drug war, I had photographed a man who had been killed in the drug war. And he was in the morgue. And I was asking about his story. He could not afford a burial. I just want to give you an idea of what life looks like here. So for 25 days, he lay there in state. I went to a place called Markets 3 slum inside the Navotas fish market, and I met his wife. She was at the bottom level of the most intense poverty. She lived in a tent. About 2 weeks later, because I was there 6 weeks, her tent was burnt down, I don't know, by somebody who didn't like her. She moved from the tent into a chicken coop. It's just hard to wrap your mind around that. And then I got back, and I have a journalist friend who had been there before I was, and he said, "Do you know this man?" And it's this guy who was sitting on his petty rickshaw, and it was that man alive. I was like, my God. I mean, and this is what the trauma, just regular day, is, but then you lay over at the drug war, and you've got, it's intensity that we can't even comprehend. And that's how strong Filipinos are. It molds their character. So back to this story. So he's got a truck full of mostly PET bottles. He backs it into the scale. They weigh the truck during the loaded, and then he empties it, and they weigh it again, and then that's how he gets paid. And it's interesting, I went on the other side and talked to the owner of this, recycling plant. These are all PET bottles. And he said, I said, what do you have to watch out for as a dealer? And he said, well, sometimes people will fill these bottles with water so that they'll be heavier and they'll get paid more. Where there's a will, there's a way. People game the system. So it's interesting to see how this works. And as I said, I think he said it was 97% purity of these PET bottles. They can sell it to make synthetic clothing, and that is the goal. Slightly less quality, they'll use it for other things. And this is your, these pellets are your finished product. And that's what he'll actually sell. A lot of it goes to China. In fact, a lot of the bottles used to go to China, but now China won't accept them anymore. So it's an evolving business. But it does seem to be having an effect in combination with the plastic ban. This is life in the slums in Happy Land, just to give you an idea. People marry young, lots of kids. Families are, basically happy. It's a family society based on the family, but hidden behind the smiles and the laughter are people going to bed early, going to bed without food at night. Part of another story I was doing there, I've been following teen widows from Duterte's drug war for the last 5 years, excuse me, and they go to bed hungry, and the stories that you hear are, again, hard to comprehend. One of the young ladies was 14. She had a child from a boyfriend, and he left. He abandoned her. She gets married, common law, because you can't get married in the Philippines until you're 18. He's dragged out by men in balaclava and killed right in front of her. The boyfriend, the biological father, comes back. They have a second child. He leaves again. He gets killed by his next girlfriend's jealous ex-lover. That's 2 young men. This is all in the interim between when I met her in 2018 and now. She had a third child, and that father, biological father's in jail awaiting sentencing to go to prison on murder charges. So when you 3 children, single mother, 3rd grade education, no job, and no help. Frankly, I'm a journalist, but I'm a human being. I may have an NGO that might help her. I can't just kind of say, well, I'm a journalist, I'm not involved. But this is the kind of hole people get dug into. And once you're in that deep, it's really, I can't even imagine getting out without help. So this is life in Happy Land. She's adorable. She wanted her picture taken. And this is the the potential problem for young guys. Maybe he's 10 years old, already got tattoos and gang symbols. So it's all fun and games, but a couple of years it might not be. It's sniffing glue on the highway. So just to give you the background, this is the drug war. This man was in his 30s, but he was gunned down. And generally speaking, what happened here was typical. 2 men on a motorbike. There was a lookout over here. They came by, killed him and his friend. Again, this is going on all around. This is their world. The Obletes family, Junmar, fled to the island of Samar. They begged him not to come back. He said, no, I'll come back and I'll bring all of you with me to Samar. It's an outer island. And he came back against the advice, and he was murdered while he was back in Market 3 slum. And I was able to witness the funeral, and I've never seen such raw emotion. It's just unbelievable. This is the night it happened. So this is kind of a sacred moment to be with families that are going through this. You know, you don't do this unless you have a reason to be there. So, well, anyway, he was executed. There, I have another image not here, but the indentations from the zip ties that the police had tied him were still evident. And there were three men. I was in a room with three men who had been killed that night, all young men, and they all had wounds in their forearms. And the bullet in his arm stopped at the zip tie, indicating that he was bound when shot. And the police said he had resisted arrest. I did meet her a year later, and she was doing a lot better. So, and another thing that was kind of interesting as well is that we knew where she lived, and yet it still took us about an hour to find her exact location. And what that meant to me is that in order to find the people who are targets, whoever the assassins were had a lot of help. Otherwise, they never would have found them. So, this is a global project, back to India, and there's no shortage of places that need help to clean up, but I think we consumer nations need to be aware of the consequences of our consumerism and their consumerism as well. So this black water is black from leather tanneries. It's a this is Yamuna River, it's holy river, and it's dead, anaerobic. But he's collecting the plastic from the riverbank so he can make a little extra money. He's probably low caste, and they're living in a settlement right on the side of the river. Tibet, plastic is everywhere. So this is at 4,000 meters, say 13,000 feet. I've been going here, I was first there in the year 2000, this is 2018. And in that time, the town has doubled, a lot of migrants from, this is officially Sichuan province, but to Tibetans, this is Kham. Half of Tibet has been written out of history and then cut up and distributed to Sichuan, Yunnan, Gansu, and all of Qinghai. Dalai Lama was born in Qinghai. So if Tibet becomes independent, half of Tibet will still be in China. This is Litang, and this is the Nanu neighborhood, and they're cutting into the grasslands. It's quite fragile ecosystem. This is a beautiful beach in Malaysia. Now, I didn't see a soul on the beach, but plastic bottles, and the plastic bottles were from Vietnam. They washed. I've always seen bottles from Vietnam and China in Okinawa in Japan. So these are all carried on the currents. This is Japan, and we're a plastic society. It's unbelievable. We do recycle PET bottles. But they burn plastic, and they don't burn it like on the side of town. They have a very high smokestack, and they burn it at a high temperature and claim that PCBs don't come out. I'm not convinced about that. But they burn all the garbage in Japan. They simply do not have room for landfill. And everything is plastic, everything in Japan. I mean, this is the inception of the project for me. I went to a home center in Tokyo, and there was plastic grass, there was plastic fake wood, the Teflon frying pans, plastic packaging, plastic hangers, plastic shoes. I took a plastic credit card and paid at a plastic cash register and put it in a plastic bag and went home. And I thought, this is crazy. And even the advertising posters were plastic, everything. This is in Italy, and even this is a little bit of plastic. So it just kind of shows you that it's so much a part of our lives. even like the Japanese supermarket. And again, the shiny packaging is plastic. The razors or toothbrushes. This is in Puerto Vallarta. And this is going to lead into the final kind of section of photos I want to share with you. I was in Bolivia, and I used Google Maps I was looking for other stories, and this happens to be just over in the border of Peru. And at 5,200 meters, so that's about 17,000 feet, this is the highest permanent human settlement on the planet. It's an artisanal gold mine called La Rinconada, and this is the end of the glacier, that they're following a receding glacier up the Andes and mining for gold. And there it is, plastic right there. There's plastic in the deepest trenches of the ocean. There's plastic in Arctic ice. It's everywhere. This is going into La Rinconada. So this is, it's 14,000 feet there, beautiful glaciers. And all of this, I'll show you later, it washes down to Lake Titicaca, and not only plastic, far worse is the mercury they use to purify the gold. This was physically the most difficult project I've ever done. Just existing at 17,000 feet, it's pretty tough. The workers are Aymara and mostly Quechua, okay, indigenous people. They're kind of adjusted to it. It was humbling trying to walk with them. But they are, the way they work is, I believe it's Cacherero is the name of the system where they work for 30 days for no money, and one day, whatever they get gold-wise, they can keep. So it's almost like indentured servitude. It's really tough life, and people die young because of the mercury hard work, and it is never much above freezing. It's a tough place to live, and also it's like 30,000 men, and mostly men, and something like 30 police. So it's truly Wild West there. 24 hours a day, buses go back and forth, a little like minivans go back and forth from the town nearby. It's heaven meets hell, it really is, because here's heaven for sure, and here's hell. And this used to be a glacier down in there. So 40 years ago, the glacier went down into where that main part is, and they've just been following it up the valley. So here are men who are workers, and I just happened to meeting them when they were doing the last of the purification of gold. So they've taken the gold and put it in with mercury. The mercury adheres to the gold, pulls it away from the ore, and then you get these little nuggets of gold and mercury, and they're about to burn it off with that blowtorch without any mask at all, no eye protection. So they're inhaling mercury vapor. There's the mercury right there. And there's gold when they go to sell it. But it takes a toll on people's health. All these are tubes carrying water, so when you vaporize the mercury, it's near freezing, and it almost immediately comes down on all the surfaces. The rooftops, and they collect water from the rooftops, they collect water from the glacier. So this is directly into the human food chain. This is the end of the glacier. Look at all those water pipes going who knows where. Some of it's to purify gold, some of it's for drinking water. And this is on the glacier. It's really a spectacular place, and that kind of intensifies what's going on. Carving into the glacier, this speeds the recession of the glacier, but it's just to hold water, a little reservoir. It's just incredible setting. And so a little further down the mountain, you have industrialized mining. And this is where you get the large quantities of mercury-contaminated water heading down river, and then it gets into Lake Titicaca and into the human food chain. This may be oh, okay. And this is Puno, Peru. You can see the effect on the environment. Also, it's partly the sewage from the town itself. But most of the lake is gorgeous. It's beautiful, clear water. The other thing I worry about with it is I was down in Bolivia, and further down this watershed is a lake 5 times as big as Lake Tahoe, a salt lake. And the salt lake completely dried up. It's a huge salt flat. I believe a little water came back in the last couple of years, but this could become a salt lake very easily because the channel that empties it, necessary so that it doesn't become an evaporation pond and become salty, is probably twice as wide as this room only for the entire lake. And the lake is like 50 miles long. So it's I guess what the lesson is from my own travels is just how sensitive the environment is and how close in many places we are to these tipping points that there's no return. So millions of people, 3.2 million people, I believe, depend on this lake for water. So, and setting aside all of the history of the water, of the lake, I mean, it's an amazing history as well. So that's what I've got presentation-wise. I could open up for questions, and I can also show more work. I have it ready if need be, but maybe hand over for questions. Thank you.
This is more about you, the photographer, than the subject matter, but how do you deal with distance, personal space as a photographer? Because obviously you got real up close and personal, and for anyone who takes pictures of anyone other than their family, distance is always an issue.
Yeah. Generally speaking, when I'm working with people, I either know them beforehand or I'll strike up a conversation. Unless I'm on a busy street, sometimes you just have to take photos of the action. And I find people, I'm a street photographer first and a journalist second, so it's part of what I like to do. But yeah, you do have to get close to people, and that means interacting with them. I use a 35 millimeter lens basically only. So that means I have to be, if I want you to be full frame, I kind of have to be like right here. So, but I just try to be friendly with people. If I'm doing a story like La Rinconada or Happy Land, I explain to them exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and give them the option to say no. So that helps. So there's a familiarity and access granted in those cases.
So you didn't get to show a little further down the recycling process, just how they were capturing it and turning it in and selling it. What was becoming that plastic? What was it turning into? Anything that was extraordinary?
Well,
Or just more plastic bottles?
just more plastic pellets as raw material.
Just that?
Yeah, that's the final product, and then they'll sell it to people who will use it for other purposes. So the more pure those pellets are, the higher the price they can get.
Within that country, or was it always like, no, it went to Germany or America? Or...
A lot of it stays in the Philippines. They tell me they don't have a lot of plastic manufacture there, but a lot goes to China, which is not surprising. They said to me the amount of plastic coming in has decreased a lot because, interestingly, without tourism, a lot of the locals can't afford a bottle of water. It's the tourists who afford that, and then you get the bottles of water in larger quantity. So I kind of found that interesting. The dealer, I think his grandparents had been born in China. He was ethnically Chinese. So he had deep ties and ready ties on the mainland for business. So he was basically dealing with his relatives on the mainland. And he was really helpful, open and telling me how, all of the pitfalls and so on and the markets, and how the markets are changing. So there's a plastic ban, so the question will be how much plastic in the future will there be available? There are little, they said the biggest quantity of plastic in the Philippines are not PET bottles. Because people can't afford to buy a big box of laundry detergent, they'll buy single or double portions. And they call it sachet. And those are the biggest quantity-wise. And there's nothing you can really do with them except chop them up and make them into like wallboard or, a picnic table or chair. So some plastic you can't actually decompose, melt down, and make into other things. You have to just kind of compact it and use it, bricks, that sort of thing. And what's interesting about that is that that doesn't decrease the amount of plastic that goes into the environment significantly. It's the reusing of it that you don't have to produce anymore. So if you make a brick out of it, you have to produce more plastic to replace it. Ideally, if you can recycle the plastic, a lot of it, you need to produce less if you truly recycle it. So I guess they call that the virtuous cycle versus recycling it for other purposes, repurposing it.
With COVID, it seemed that there was like a lot of single-use plastic being used to like reduce people like touching the same thing. Have you started to see like the impact of that in the environment in your work?
Not personally. Yeah, I mean, it is a huge issue. I mean, Japan, it's hard because it just kind of goes away. They're very efficient, and they're very jealously guard facts like that. Philippines, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, you see these plastic, or you see paper masks all over the place. So, but I think it might be more of an issue in wealthier countries like U.S. and Japan. Like we were having everything delivered by Amazon, But they do recycle cardboard. At least that's a good thing in Japan. But here, I think more in Europe and in North America, you'd see that.
So with digital photography and cheaper cell phones, right now photography is available to more and more people. So did you encounter any situation where people were sharing pictures that they were taking of their communities? And have you done or would consider doing like some kind of photo voice project where you like elicit pictures and interpretations with the community members to sort of see it also from their eyes?
Mm-hmm. I usually just see snapshots, but what you're describing, so say for example, a lot of the communities I visit don't have enough money even for a smartphone, but if they have smartphones, yeah, I think it's a great idea to have people document their own community. But it's just, a lot of times for me, I'll document hunter-gatherer communities who aren't even they don't even have cell phones. So, but to get a different perspective. It would be interesting to see, for example, Happy Land, how they see themselves. But a lot of it is, this kind of thing for now. So you'd have to talk to them about strategies of how you document life. But I think it's a great idea. Yeah, absolutely. But not much. There's a lot of talk about it, something that I'm exploring. I have a Instagram site called Everyday Climate Change, one word, Everyday Climate Change. And I employ a bit of that. I've got photographers from all over the world. But again, one of the problems, like I'd like to have more people from sub-Saharan Africa, but there's not a lot of 4G down there. And it's like it's a smartphone device only. So I'm constantly asking, people, do you know anybody in sub-Saharan Africa who can share work with us? But it's a constant struggle as people get more online. People are better able to tell their own stories, for sure.
So when you're taking these pictures of like violent situations and violence in all the different forms it takes, how do you navigate that line between accurately depicting what's happening and like sensationalizing it?
Good question. For me, it was about not being salacious about it, and I was concentrating on the ripples sent out to the community. I don't know, how are we doing for time?
We're good.
Maybe I'll share with you good examples of that. I've been following I described to you the widows that I had met. I'm interested, having lost people in my family, knowing somewhat what it feels like. These are people and families being shattered. And it's going to take a couple of generations, if ever, for families to come back. And I cannot imagine waking up, as I said, I was standing in the morgue, and I'm like, these guys were alive this morning, and they're half my age. I've already lived twice the life they have. It's over. And to me, that's hard. How do you portray that? As you said, responsibly. Let me, I'll pull something up with the widow. So one response to that is I did a project, and this was also funded by the Pulitzer Center, on the widows. Okay. We'll get as far as we can. So it started in 2017, and this is just a case where I wasn't, and you'll see some photos twice, forgive me for that. But I didn't go there intending to do this specific story. I wanted to show what was going on. And then I started meeting families, and they're really nice. People, it may be helpful to share some information. My ex-wife is Filipino-American, so for 10 years I was a de facto member of Filipino family, and they reminded me of people I care about. So it was hard to photograph. So this is Remy Hernandez. She lives near a city dump in a place called Payatas. She's almost 90 now. So her son, typical story. He was told, Constantine Dewan, don't come back. No, I want to come back and cook dinner for my daughter. It's her birthday. Police found out about it. They killed him. And his wife was already in prison on I guess shabu, it's methamphetamine charges. So she was left to raise 7 children. This is from the Obletes family. This is the boy who went to the outer island, but her face was just the expression of strength and sorrow. She just had a very expressive face. And again, she was raising a grandchild as a result. This is Jenilyn, and this is the moment like she's realizing her brother was killed. And again, this is where you get into the intrusion. I wanted to convey the rawness of what it means to have a family member taken from you. And this is her brother. So this is the indentation from the zip tie. That's the bullet still in his wrist. It stopped. Right. So he was bound when he was killed. The police said he resisted arrest. I don't know how that's possible. This is Jocelyn Banting when she was 14. She's come back to visit her mother. Her mother lives in Smoky Mountain. Smoky Mountain was famous because it was a city dump and it emitted methane. It was always smoking with spontaneous combustion. Now it's perversely a green island in the slums. People actually farm on it. Her mother lived there. She came back to visit her child. The child thought she was the elder sister, called her Ate, and thought the grandmother was the mother. And you can see she's pretty discontent. This is Jasmine Durana at 15 with Hazel. Is the woman with 3 children now and 3rd grade education. These are nice families. This is just fate. If she were in the United States, she'd be doing fine. I'm confident of that. And that's what blows my mind. This is where she lived. I was afraid to fall through when visiting her. Imagine that in a typhoon. I mean, incredible. So, this woman, her daughter was killed at 16. She was in Singapore. She had to ask her boss time off to bury her daughter. And this is where it's happening. This is Jasmine's in-laws, and they're a nice family. I mean, and they took her in for a while after her husband, their son, died, Toto. Here she is. This is Remy Hernandez, the 83-year-old woman's house, and this was guarding the entrance where the assassins passed. I just found it slightly ironic that.
Why did the assassins kill these people?
Well, Duterte's, the former president now, determined that he wanted drug users and dealers killed. And he said, if you kill 6 million, I don't care, kill them all. They're vermin. He used that word. And so when he came to power, into office, the president of the Philippines could only have one term. He unleashed this wicked war on drugs. It was really a war on poor drug dealers and poor drug users. Now, the former dictator Ferdinand Marcos' son, Bongbong Marcos, is the president, and the vice president's elected separately. Duterte's daughter is vice president. It's crazy. So here's Remy at the house with the kids. And here they are. They're a lot bigger now, and they're all okay. She's married now, and the others are living with her. This is in the house. The bullet hole is made from a bullet that passed through Konstantin's body. And they couldn't afford to replace the chair, so they still use it. They still use it now. The funeral. And it's like Latin America. They call them apartment tombs. And it's like a 5-year lease, and these leases are coming up now. And there are all kinds of consequences with that. They're burying people in mass graves now because they can't afford to either renew the lease or get another kind of tomb. Okay, if I have time, I can show you chapter 2. Try to get through it all so it'll make sense to you. Some of these you may see, you have seen already. Okay. So this is 2018, and this is Jasmine. And she was hopeful. Her plans were to open a drink stand and go into the market and sell drinks. This is Toto, photo of him, and where she lives. Where else in the world can you think of that you put a photo of your assassinated husband on Facebook? And that's the world that they live in. These are bottles that she saved up money. She needed roughly $150 to start a drink business, and it was taking a while. And then she finally saved up for all the things she needed. She needed an umbrella, she needed a table, she needed the bottles, and she needed the makings of the drinks. And then they chased her out of the market anyway. So this is Jocelyn Banting at 14. She was self-mutilating from the stress of working in a bar. What happened with her husband was, well, he wasn't the biological father of the child either. She was impregnated by a client who not surprisingly, just fled. And she says she's 15, she was 14. A 40-year-old man married her. And then he went out for a beer one night and he never came back because he was killed. So she's just had an argument with her mother again. Pao thinks that grandmother is the mother and that her mother is her elder sister. This is quite intimate access. So this kind of shows that they're not bonding. It's pretty hard to be there, actually. And so this is later. Jocelyn's in prison. She's been busted for selling meth. And Lenny thinks that she's going to be able to get her out, and we all did, from prison that day. She's got documents from the court, and we're on our way to the jail to get her out. And we get to the jail, and in the Philippines, you can wave to your relative in the window. So Jocelyn's in the window and Lenny's outside. Typical living. This is a typical meal. Imagine navigating the legal system when you really don't have a very good education. I don't think she finished high school, and she's got to navigate the legal system. An NGO helped her to do that. Eventually, Jocelyn did get out. Meanwhile, crime is coming back. This is on the road. I saw 20 kids coming out. I thought they were playing a game until I realized they were hunting somebody. The kids, they're teenagers. These are Lenny's hands with arthritis. This photo almost got me kicked off of Instagram. They seem to, Philippines, kids don't wear clothes sometimes, okay? Hell's bells. But they said if I put any more child porn on Instagram, they would bar me. Yikes. But it's a beautiful moment. This is Lourdes, her daughter-in-law, when she got out of prison, and she's high. So we were all really worried about it. So this, in 2018, we ended up, Lourdes, you can feel the tension. Lourdes disappeared for 3 days. And we checked friends, the other city dumps. We checked hospitals. We checked even the police to figure, where is she? She's gone for 3 days, and this is part of the search for her. She just eventually came back. She had left the house drunk. And then I'll do very quickly, sorry, thanks for the patience, this year, because it is interesting. I went back in July, same time I did Happy Land, to see how everybody was doing. It'll come up. Okay, so just like a little recap. So we have Jocelyn at 14. Jocelyn's doing much better. This is Jocelyn now. And she's back with Pal. And they're doing quite well. So, no drug habit. They're working. Her partner is in the, not the recycling business, but garbage collecting, sanitation, I guess you call it. I think this is an important photograph because it's pretty rough, but this is good. This is a concrete structure that is safe. It's not a hut, exposed to typhoon winds. So they're doing well, and it's relatively safe here. So she seemed to be on her way. This is where her mother lived, at Smoky Mountain, and you can see there are some farms there. This is her father-in-law. So what happened is now Lenny's in prison. The grandmother's in prison for selling shabu, methamphetamine. But it was actually his. So she got busted for him. And she could be in prison for up to 20 years. So so it goes. Here's her boyfriend. Look, he's a young guy. He's doing really well. But when he was a teenager, he used to use shabu or snort or smoke it. And he would mug people. Like, I was a young guy once. I can understand what it would be like to have no opportunity. But he's got his act together now. He's clean. And he's got a good job. So he's doing well. And she's got a tattoo instead of self-mutilating, instead of cutting. And you can see by the way she's walking, she's happier. So in the context of that life, she's doing fairly well. Still, it's a tough place to live. Jasmine's having a hard time. So she's got 3 kids. She's living in literally 1 square meter. I couldn't stand up in her space, and I was afraid I was going to fall through the floor. No job. This is Hazel now. She's adorable. That's the pity. I mean, she's just tired. This is where Jasmine lives. The kids. And she is preparing to take a job in a place called Puerto Galera, which I had been before, and there's a lot of sex work there. And she was going to take a job as a masseuse. And we just kind of, I'm a person. I just said, be aware that that happens there. No, I'm going to go. But she was back in 24 hours. Her friend introduced her to this job, and sure enough, they wanted her to do other things, and she wasn't willing to do it. So she came back. So now she's unemployed. So she's tough without an education. But this is her preparation. You can see she's kind of nervous about the job, getting into a jeepney, and off she goes. Remy's doing really well now. And so is Lourdes. Here's Lourdes. She's clean. The family's doing pretty well. She's got a job now. So it's a mixed bag, but that was Lourdes in 2018. This is Lourdes now. So they seem to be in a good place as well. It's interesting to see how, and she's working at, this is a cafe, like a coffee shop owned by, or set up by the Catholic Church. It's very powerful in the Philippines. And this is set up for widows of, they call EKJ, EJK, extrajudicial killings. So they can earn a little bit of money. Remnants of the past life. And that's pretty much it. So it's just interesting to see the timeline, the progression. And some of the families are doing better and some of the families aren't. And I have deep respect for them because I don't understand the pressures they're under. I don't think any of us can. I mean, it's just intense. So they teach me things, and I keep in touch with them through my fixer, who's a person, you know, in media on the ground there, who I work with, Gil Ramos. She's wonderful. And ask how they're doing. She keeps in touch with people there. So, and I intend to keep doing that. So anyway, I kept you a long time. Thank you so much for viewing the work.
What's next?
I'm thinking about trying to get back to Borneo, where there's industrial logging, and the Penan people are one of the few in that particular area that are actually pushing back and successfully. So knock on wood, it'll happen. Thank you. Thanks.